everybody, New York City, and welcome to the 2019 Women's International Cup launch event. That music just wanted to make you get the party started. My name is Melissa Ortiz. I'm a former professional soccer player and Olympian for the Colombian women's national team. And I kindly introduce as well Brendan Doyle, who's a Senior Vice President of Elite Programming and Youth Development at Relevant Sports Group.
Thank you.
We have some exciting news today ahead of, well, what is the rave and crave of women's soccer? And that is with Relevant and launching the International Champions Cup tournament just around the corner. As you know, women's soccer is at the creme de la creme. It's growing immensely, and also not only just in the US, globally, but as well as female activism. Now, Brendan, so many great news ahead of us, slight changes to the upcoming Women's International Champions Cup event. A few questions for you.
Okay.
When and where will this women's ICC event be and take place?
Okay, so it will be in August 2019, between the 12th and the 19th in Cary, North Carolina at Salem Stadium in Wake Med Soccer Park. And it will be two double-header events. On August 15th, there'll be semi-final double-headers, and on August 18th, there'll be the final and the third place playoff.
Awesome. And what are the new teams? There's some exciting new teams on board, right?
Yeah, well, the tournament is being hosted by the reigning Women's International Champion Cup champions, which is North Carolina Courage, and they'll be joined by Olympique Lyonnais from France, who are the reigning European champions, the UEFA Champions League, and the reigning French champions. And we'll also be joined by Atletico Madrid, who are the reigning La Liga Iberdrola Femenina champions, and also Manchester City from England, who finished second in the league in England, the NWSL last year, and also reached the Final Four of the Champions League. So 4 great teams, and we're very excited to host it in the second event.
Exciting, and what a high level of soccer we're going to see. Now, as we know, with women's rights and women's soccer rights and so many female players speaking up and voicing for equality, and not just equality, but actual pay in terms of the women's game. Can you share with us about what the ICC is going to do for the women's teams? Yeah,
I mean, we're bringing together 4 of the best teams in the world, and we're giving them a chance to compete for the second year. This year we brought in criteria rather than just inviting teams from around the world, because we want this to be something going forward that teams qualify for. So we want to have the European champions playing against the champions of the NWSL and the NWSL Shield winners, and then the winners of the biggest domestic leagues in Europe, which at the moment are England, Germany, France and Spain. And then as we grow this tournament, we want to include different league winners from around the world.
And can you elaborate on now the prize money involved?
Yeah, no, we brought prize money in for the second year. For the first year, there was no prize money last year for our inaugural event. So that's something very new that the clubs are happy with, that the eventual champions will have some prize money.
What a great progress that is. It's exciting. And what do you think is going to be the most exciting matchup for the tournament?
Well, I'm looking forward to all the games, because there's 4 teams in it, and in particular looking forward to any games that involve our 2 ICC ambassadors. So Heather O'Reilly from North Carolina Courage and Ada Hegerberg from Olympique Lyonnais, who's the Ballon d'Or winner, are both ambassadors for the International Champions Cup. So love to see those ladies play.
Absolutely. So last year, as I said, was the inaugural women's event. Now this year, what is there to look forward into the future as we look in the growing women's sport, but now in terms of the ICC?
Well, we're already planning for 2020. So the idea in 2020 is 2 soccer markets in the US, hosted by 2 of the American teams, and then expand it to 8 teams. So we've got more teams from the NWS, and then more teams from Europe or anywhere else around the world, which is making real progress. Like La Liga MX are putting great teams together, and it's the same in Italy as well, getting really strong. So we're looking forward to expanding this in 2020. And then beyond that, it's something we want to do every year and make it bigger and better and create a true world club championship for women.
Maybe get some of the Colombian teams involved. I might lace up my boots for that one.
Definitely, we'll do that, Melissa.
Perfect. Well, thank you. That's a brief just overview, but now we have some exciting news joining us here on the panel. I want to introduce to you no greater, no less than Heather O'Reilly, who is a three-time Olympic gold medalist.
Hi, guys.
Can we sit?
Yeah. Three-time Olympic gold medalist, 2015 Women's World Cup champion, and right now currently playing with the North Carolina Courage in the NWSL. We also have joining us Kurt Johnson, who is the president and GM of North Carolina Football Club. And president and GM of NC Courage and North Carolina FC. Thank you guys for coming and joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Exciting things ahead for women's soccer, for sure. So we're starting off, Brendan, back to you.
Okay.
So can you explain to us a bit, what is the women's ICC and why is it exactly important, especially at this time and age in the growth of women's soccer?
Yeah, I think it's different in a way to the men's ICC tournament, which is a pre-season summer tournament for the biggest and best teams from around the world. I think with the women's ICC, we're trying to create a really competitive tournament for the best club teams from around the world. So it's mid-season for the NWSL, it's pre-season for the European teams, but they've all been really motivated to come out and play. So I see it as the most elite play at the club level in world soccer, and we're very excited to host it again.
And as you say, elite in terms of club soccer, what does it mean in terms of global soccer? What does this tournament exactly represent? And it's such a astounded, tournament, and we don't see many of that in the women's game in terms of club competition. So what does that mean in the global
Yeah, I think
aspect?
even in the men's game, you know, the World Club Championship is something that's often talked about that needs to be improved upon. It's not something that everyone looks forward to. Well, we want to create this on the women's side of club soccer. And I think with the women's game, and I'm sure Heather would agree, that the women's game has grown through the national teams playing each other, whereas the men's game is driven by the club teams. Right. And for it to really get to the level we want it to get to and impact grassroots and elite players, there needs to be a club competition, and clubs need to be full-time and professional to give the players like Heather the chance to be real professionals and dedicate their working lives to it. So we're very excited.
Heather, so you played in last year's inaugural Women's ICC event. What was your experience like?
It was a thrill. Everybody on the North Carolina Courage was so excited about the tournament. The ICC did a wonderful job hosting us in Miami. And although, you know, we were missing some of our players in order to win, you know, the ICC, we had to go pretty deep into our roster. Yeah. And so to be able to win it was, you know, something that I think that we'll all remember. But I was so excited that ICC was forming a women's division. And then when I heard that the Courage was, you know, the first team from the US, like, it was like all these worlds colliding for me because, you know, I've played over in Europe. I came back from playing with Arsenal Football Club for about a year and a half. So this perspective that I've always had that has been very US-centric, very US women's national team-centric, expanded. And I was able to see sort of what, you know, the phenomenal things that are going on in Europe and across the world in women's football. And like Brennan said, we can't just rely on the World Cup every 4 years and the Olympics every 4 years to be these platforms for women's soccer. And the ICC is just this another layer in professionalism and competition for the women's game. And I think, eventually the paradigm will shift even in the U.S., where, you know, the clubs will be the primary training ground for the U.S. national team and source of employment and things like that. And national team duty will be, you know, what you go on, you know, every few weeks. But at this point in American soccer, the national team has been such the focal point. And I think a tournament like the ICC will eventually flip that paradigm and continue to grow the club side of the women's game.
Yeah, I agree. I think in terms of women's soccer, and especially with our national team and other national teams, it's always that excitement, that attention within that small gap of Women's World Cup, Olympics, but it's apart from that, it's where's the attention? It's a little bit of lost interest, but like the ICC, it regains that attention and really helps build the women's game. Kurt, a question for you. Why is it important for the North Carolina Courage to participate in the ICC?
Well, first I want to thank Relevant Sports, because without Relevant, we wouldn't be here. On behalf of Steve Malik, our owner, and an entire North Carolina Courage organization, we're thrilled to be able to be a part of this. I think first and foremost, we feel an urgency to compete against the best, learn from the best, test ourselves against the best. We also feel an urgency to evolve and to create a situation, opportunities where we can compete, and we're willing to test things and to push for change in order to make it happen, whether that's scheduling, whether that's hosting in terms of facilities. So it's a proud moment for us to be the hosts, and we're committed for the long haul to grow this.
Question for all of you, and Brendan, you can answer first. What would you like the Women's ICC to become?
I think the World Club Championship in professional women's soccer, and I think it would be great if it was on an annual event on the calendar, and we can fit it in amongst everything else. And to do that, we'd probably need some help with scheduling from the federations. Yeah, that's how I see it, a Women's World Club Championship.
You, Heather?
Yeah, I hope this becomes the premier women's club event. And, you know, it is difficult with schedule, but I think at the end of the day, you know, there's Champions League that's happening in Europe. In the US, we don't have a Champions League. And, you know, it's really hard to compare our clubs to each other and to other countries that have wonderful leagues themselves. So this is an opportunity to say, like, bring it on. Let's face off and see who's got the strongest league and the best teams, and you know, to fill that void through World Cup and Olympic years.
Like a Club World Cup.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is our Club World Cup.
Yeah. And Kurt?
My view is strike while the iron's hot. You know, maybe some view the Women's World Cup, well, why are you having it in the same year? No, I think we should be doing more in this moment in time. And, you know, my view is it's going to be larger and better with the fuel of the Women's World Cup leading into this event. And I think it positions the event for future success, you know, in 2020.
I guarantee there's going to be World Cup champions in the ICC tournament this year. I'm very confident. I, of course, hope it's the Americans. But between those 4 world-class club teams, there's going to be World Cup champions on that field, and I'm really looking forward to it. And this will be the summer of women's soccer in our country and in the world.
For sure, and you already see large companies weighing in on the push of women's soccer too. Heather, another question for you. So last year we saw North Carolina Courage, PSG, Man City, and Lyon. The games were pretty par, 2-1, 1-0 for the most part, I think, except for that 3-0 loss by Man City, I think it was.
Yeah, to Lyonnais from Manchester City.
Which took me by surprise, not gonna lie. I was there at the stadium. So what kind of teams would you like to see in the future from what leagues? As we know, La Liga Iberdrola Femenina is growing immensely. We know that Mexico also has a professional women's league now. Colombia has one. Argentina just announced it as the latest. What leagues and which team would you like to see in the future?
Well, my former teammates at Arsenal are top of the league right now. So I hope to see them maybe at next year's edition of the ICC. I think there's really great growth going on around the world, like you alluded to. I think Juventus in Italy is doing some fantastic things. I think the German league has always been producing really good clubs teams. Wolfsburg is one of the top sides in the world, just recently knocked out of the Champions League semifinals. And of course, Sweden has been a country that, you know, when nobody else had a women's professional league, Sweden stepped up and had a very strong league. But, you know, like you said, clubs in South America have put a lot of interest in. Mexico is getting 40,000 to some of their games. So there's options now, and that's a fantastic thing. You know, as a player, I think, you know, the 99ers can tell you, you know, they didn't have that much choice. I think Shannon McMillan played in Japan, Brandy Chastain played in Japan, some of the players went over to Sweden, but choices were limited. And it's wonderful to see now there's, you know, 10, 12 countries that you can go to and play top division women's football.
And with your experience, you've played at Arsenal, you've played at the NWSL. How do you think, you know, the U.S. clubs fare out or play against in their level in comparison to the European clubs?
I still think America has the best, most competitive league, top to bottom. I think it's the most competitive in terms of, you know, as Kurt knows and probably sweats it out every weekend, every game is very challenging and is very competitive. And I think the national team players are allocated fairly evenly throughout the league. So every team is super competitive. But in England, for instance, you know, it's consistently been the top teams, the same teams rather, at the top of the league. So there's a little bit more maybe predictability and you know, divide between the top teams and the bottom. Whereas in the U.S., I think that it's a very competitive league, top to bottom. And so that in itself kind of leads me to think that the U.S. still has the most competitive league. But the, you know, Lyon being repeat Champions League winners, Manchester City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Wolfsburg, these teams that are year in and year out putting really good training environments together, good teams that are competing with the best. You know, they're making a push to claim that their, you know, respective leagues are perhaps the strongest. So there's no way to tell unless you face off against each other, and that's what the ICC is for.
Heather's like, bring it. Kurt, so Heather was just mentioning about the clubs, and I want to ask you, you know, the European clubs are doing a great job marketing-wise as well, really growing, putting more attention on the clubs and on the women's game. How important it is for you yourself to promote North Carolina Courage?
Yeah, it's huge. And we have the largest youth to pro soccer club in the United States. And it's the principle is it's equality, giving opportunity for the youngest girls, the youngest boys, all the way up to the Courage players in North Carolina FC and in the USL. The club environment has to be what drives the week by week development of players as well as fandom, all that stuff. And I think that this event gives us an opportunity to shine a light on the women's club environment and what's great about it and what needs to get better. And we'll learn from Lyon, we'll learn from Manchester United, we'll learn from Atletico Madrid. Just like last year, we observed, you know, many of the others. So the reality is we are focused, laser focused every single day on building our club at all levels.
So as we know, it's the Women's World Cup this summer, and we briefly touched upon that, but the timing is right there. And as you mentioned, it's here, it's now, it's women's soccer summer. So for you, how important and how great is it that the timing has played into par with Women's World Cup, the build of that, and now Women's ICC?
Well, it wasn't easy to get this together. It wasn't the calendar being one of the fundamental challenges. We know that the European teams will be coming in their early days of their season. We know we'll be you know, getting players back from 8 or 9 players back from the World Cup. It's a challenge, but we have to work through these challenges together, pool resources, and find ways to make this happen. And that's why I tip my hat to Relevant Sports, because we have to have people willing, companies willing to step up with the funding, quite honestly, and the resources, holding events like this to showcase it in the proper way. And it's been lacking for a long time. So very excited about 2019, August in Cary at Salem Stadium, as well as beyond. We want to be a part of it for many years to come. We know we'll have to earn that on the field, and it's a focus for us.
So Heather, with North Carolina Courage, and you playing last year, you winning last year, champions, all your teammates
winning goal.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Yeah.
As I like to say, even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes.
There it is. You made me lose my point of track with that. So, with the U.S. Women's National Team, your friends, your teammates are all over the country or even all over the world playing internationally. What is their take on the women's ICC? Have they shown interest? Are they saying like, oh my gosh, I want to play in the women's ICC?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of jealousy last year from other clubs throughout the U.S. that, you know, they thought it was cool that we were able to face off against these premier clubs around the world. I'm sure that they wanted to be part of it. Yeah. And I also thought that there was a bit of camaraderie around them actually supporting us in a way. It was almost like the Ryder Cup in golf, where it's U.S. versus Europe or U.S. versus the world. And I felt like there was a little bit of pride amongst the NWSL players to see the American club win the ICC. And that was nice to sort of feel like they had your back. I think, you know, everybody wants to feel like you have the strongest league in the world. And I think that the ICC was an opportunity to sort of put a title on it that we can say, well, we won the ICC, therefore we are the best club in the world. And therefore, we all are the best league in the world. And I think that a lot of the players across the U.S. felt a lot of pride around that.
Very cool. So the tournament does fall, as we said, right after Women's World Cup, kind of like a preseason for the European teams and mid-season NWSL. So how do you think that will impact not only North Carolina Courage, but also the European teams coming over?
Well, you know, for me, it gives us a great runway, quite honestly. We plan to have a launch event, hopefully in April, in conjunction with Relevant Sports and in the local marketplace. I'm excited that we have a runway that goes through the Women's World Cup. We'll certainly use that as a tool to promote this. From the competitive side, Heather can speak better to that for sure, but I think the runway is really important, and it'll be one of the factors to make this annual event successful, is the promotion of it, obviously.
Absolutely. And for you as a player, how was it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you can say last year, for instance, we didn't have our full squad. You know, the Europeans were in their preseason, so there's always like, well, you know, are we at level ground? But what can you do, right? You're wearing your badge and you're wearing your crest and you want to represent it the best that you can. And I think that people are competitors. So whether or not, you know, where they are in their season is irrelevant. People want to compete and prove that they're the best.
I think if we waited for the perfect moment, we'd never get it going.
Yeah.
Because there just isn't for everyone. So.
Right.
And again, there's going to be huge excitement around the World Cup this summer. Yep. There's going to be some very happy players playing in this ICC, and there's going to be players that maybe have a little bit to prove, and maybe their midsummer didn't go exactly as they wanted it to, and now they have another chance to compete.
Right. Brendan, for you, have you seen any interest on the partnership side for the women's event?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, we've been all over the world trying to put this together, from FIFA to Tokyo and all over the US. And yeah, our first partners, Nike, have already stepped in and are in place, and we're going to have plenty more in the next few months that we're going to be giving a shout out to. But yeah, Nike are on board, which we hope they would be. We see it as a perfect platform for them, and we're going to do a lot of cool stuff around it with Nike. So yeah, very excited with that. With
the growth of women's soccer, with last year's success of the women's ICC, what does this show you, and what does this tell you about women's soccer on the global landscape?
Yeah, I mean, records are being broken all the time. You know, we had 61,000 in Spain for the game recently between Atletico Madrid and Barcelona. We had 40,000 in Turin recently for Juventus against Fiorentina. In 2018, I think 4 of the top 10 attendances for club soccer were in Mexico, which is surprising but unbelievable. 35 to 40,000 every time. So everybody is interested in this. When our executive chairman, Charlie Stilitano, travels around the globe meeting with the top teams to bring to the ICC, they are all asking the question now, are we invited to the women's? What do we do to have to get to the women's tournament because they want to be involved? And I think that conversation was not happening 2 years ago. So I think we're making great strides forward, but it's also gathering momentum, the women's game, and I think it's going to be great, and we're happy to be involved and pushing it forward. And I think when you're asking Heather questions about the other teams being a bit jealous about them being in the in the women's ICC. That's down to Kurt and Steve Malik, the ownership group, because we kept pushing and pushing and trying to make it work, and it was never perfect. But we both saw the opportunity and want to get it done. So we really appreciate them as our partners, and you know, also from me and for my team at Relevant, Esmeralda Negron and Andres Luisa. We want to thank our ownership group, Stephen Ross and Matt Higgins, and our leadership group, Charlie Stilitano, our chairman, Danny Silman, our CEO, and Aaron Ryan, our chief operating officer, because they see our vision and they keep supporting it. And without their support, this would not be happening. So,
what would a success look like for you guys for this year?
I think success is we've moved to a real soccer market in a soccer-specific stadium, and if we can fill that stadium for the games or close to full, and great audience on TV, every game is going to be live again with ESPN, who are ICC's partners across all the properties, and getting eyes on this tournament and people talking about it. I think that would be a huge success. But we first got the feel of this last year at the tournament when we saw people like Heather, who's played at the highest level. They were into it. They were excited. They wanted to get their hands on the trophies, and they were appreciative of being treated exactly like the men's teams. And we took it seriously. And seeing that at the end of the final was when I first thought, yeah, we've got something here. This is going to be really, really good. So
it will be in North Carolina, a soccer stadium, which is perfect and something that is so necessary. As Brendan had just said, stadiums have been sold out in Europe as of recently, Mexico. How can we have that happen here in the U.S.?
Yeah. Well, it's work, but it's promotion. It's fun things like this. It's real competition. It's pitting the best, the passionate against one another. I'll give you one example. Our head coach, Paul Riley. You know, there could be a zillion reasons for him, as well as our players, to say, oh, there's schedule congestion or this or that. No, this is a priority. This is fun. How often do you get to be a part of something that's the first? I think that's Paul's quote in a recent article. And being a part of the first last year, winning it, being able to host it this year in a soccer-specific stadium, it's part competition, right? That drives all of us, our club competition, and it's part building fans, one by one. We're proud, and I challenge everybody to do their homework. I think our facility hosted more varied soccer events in 2018 than any in history. Men's national team, women's national team, Open Cup, men's and women's pro soccer, Final Four, ACC tournament, all in our stadium last year. I don't think that's ever been done. We're driving every day to build our fan base, to build the coverage of the sport, and I know others are, and this is a great opportunity for all of us to build the game.
As we know, there's so many participants of the game in America. There's so many kids that play, but it's about embedding it in the culture, embedding global soccer in the culture, and I think that the ICC tournament is another opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. I think ICC as well is about the whole global part of it and really encompassing the culture and the love for the sport. So whether it's just with the Futures launch that we just announced before, from the youth divisions to the women to the ICC men's landscape, it's beautiful because from the youth perspective, you really get to grasp of how soccer is really growing in this country. Heather, who are you most excited to play against?
Great question. I loved facing off against Lyon last year. I mean, Champions League winner, I don't know how many times.
5 times.
5 times. I mean, that's incredible. I've never been able to play Champions League football. That's just one thing off my resume that I never got to do. So if anybody wants to sign me.
No.
For a game.
Take that back. For a game.
For one game, and then, no. So, for me to be able to face off at least against the Champions League winner, that was really special for me. And we were able to beat Lyon, and we celebrated that game like it was the World Cup final. We were just so thrilled to hoist that trophy, and that turned out to be the first of 3 trophies last season, which we're incredibly proud of. But Lyon sort of had the run of play in the game, and so we won the match, but I feel like we're excited to play them again and hopefully get a similar result, but also control the match a little bit more. So I would love to face off against Leon again.
And in your experience, I think 14 years playing for the U.S. women's national team,
Yeah.
who do you think is by far one of the most impressive, talented women's soccer player? And don't say Melissa Ortiz.
Yeah. Oh, you took mine.
Yeah.
Listen, I think that, besides my U.S. comrades, who I would put, a few of them very much up there.
Okay, let's start U.S. women's national team. Who do you think throughout your entire
Yeah.
history? Who is your top 3? And then we'll go, I don't know, top
Yeah.
2 globally.
Mia Hamm, one of the best players of all time, and an idol of mine that I had the opportunity to play with for a couple of years. I think Abby Wambach's proven to herself to be one of the, she still holds the record for FIFA all-time goal scorers. Incredibly special player. And then one that you'll see today, Michelle Akers, who I did not have an opportunity to play with, but who I admired as a young player. And one of the reasons why I'm so excited to be with the women up here today is I was a 14-year-old kid at Giants Stadium watching the 99ers open their match. And I had like tears in my eyes seeing these women win and Mia score. And that was the moment that I decided that I wanted to do that. And I think that if you can't be it unless you see it. And I think that that's, why the ICC is so special to give an opportunity for players across the world to watch their stars. So I think that those 3 maybe are the top in the U.S. ever. I think, one player that has proven herself for the last decade plus is Marta.
Yes.
She's been, annoying me for the last, 10 to 12 years because I'm always playing against her, and she's able to do things on the ball that maybe nobody else is able to do. And so it's been a thrill to be able to coincide my career with Marta's on the club side and in the international game as well.
I was about to say that. Before it would be like every 4 years, every 2 years, maybe friendlies here and there, USA, Brazil, but now you get to face off against Marta and, Orlando.
Yeah, we saw her just last week, and it was a solid result for the North Carolina Courage. 4-0 over Orlando, so we won up in the competition between Heather and Marta.
There you go, that nudge. And then your second?
I'm sorry?
In your other global, whoever.
I think in her day, Birgit Prinz from Germany was perhaps one of the, the best players in the world over a long time. So I think, Germany has been able to do it. They're, I believe, the only country that won back-to-back World Cups in 2007 and then, or 3 and 2007. So the U.S. is going to look to repeat that feat, but Germany's been able to produce some incredible players.
Do you guys have favorite female players at all?
I think for me globally, Kelly Smith.
Nice.
Because I remember when she played at Seton Hall here and then in Philadelphia, and she worked with me coaching while she was after her student days. So talented, such a great player. So I think being from England, I would say Kelly. Kurt?
Oh, I think Charmaine Hooper from Canada, somebody that I grew up with at NC State, and we played a lot together, and she's an incredible player, incredible athlete.
Absolutely, and for me, I'd have to say Marta as well, but Heather O'Reilly for me, No, I'm serious. I got to play with you a very little bit at the Breakers, and you were definitely inspiring.
Thanks.
Being a few years, older to me, I looked up to you at my stunt at the Breakers,
Thanks.
so yeah. So that about wraps it up for today's Women's International Champions Cup launch. We are very excited to see what's going to happen just around the corner, to see Heather play, and as well to see the amazing outcome at North Carolina. So thank you all for having us, and thank you, Brendan, Heather, and Kurt, for joining us.
It's hard to put your finger on it, to describe where the feeling comes from. It's not so much about watching your team win, but watching their team lose. It's pure passion, a sense of belonging, a cause to fight for. It's a rivalry that transcends borders. This derby was born in Madrid, but it will come alive in New York. The Madrid Derby. Champions meet here.